You nervous, bro?
Are you?
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of The Gentleman's Club, a series inside my own podcast series. So, The Gentleman's Club is a little bit different than my normal podcast episodes where I am sitting with an expert and I am interviewing that expert and trying to learn from them. In The Gentleman's Club, I will be sitting down with certain friends of mine, different every time, and I'm just having conversations that I would have off camera, on camera with them. I'm very blessed to have intelligent, hardworking people in my life, wise people in my life, and we just have great conversations. And I thought I'd be able to share those conversations with you because I personally learn a lot walking away from those conversations, and I'm sure an audience would as well. So this one's a little bit more casual, a little bit more conversationally. You will see I'm not wearing a suit, so it's not like it's a different vibe than what I'm usually doing the other podcast. But I thought the banter was really good. I thought the conversation was really good. The humor was good. We got serious where we needed to be serious. There was jokes where we could throw jokes. So I thought it was a pretty entertaining podcast. This podcast is with two of my good friends, Bisho Aziz and Kiro Zachary. All three of us share the Coptic faith. We are all born and raised at our Coptic church. We've known each other forever and ever. So the chemistry's there, the banter's there, like I said, and we get serious when we need to get serious. We talk about everything to do with our own faith as Christians, what it means to be a man in Christianity, and a bunch of topics surrounding those main topics. But it was a spontaneous conversation. We didn't really prepare anything going into it, and I thought it turned out great. It is a longer podcast, I will admit. It's pretty long. But I encourage you to watch the full way through because I thought it was, maybe it's just me, but I thought it was entertaining and I thought it was very insightful. So the podcast is on Spotify because I know like it's hard to watch the YouTube video the entire time, but I highly encourage you to go find Toby Talks Podcast on Spotify. The link will be in the description. Listen to it when you're in the car, when you're working out, when you're walking between classes, whatever you're doing. I really encourage you to do that. I also have an Instagram and a TikTok page where I post the clips. So I encourage you to follow all those things. I am also doing a $50 raffle on my Instagram. So if you go on my Instagram, the directions for that $50 raffle will be there as well. Again, I want to thank my boys Kiro and Bisho for doing this podcast with me. And I can't wait to share with you all what's next. Welcome to this episode of the Toby Talks Podcast and the first edition of the Gentleman's Club, which is a little bit different than what I usually do, where I'm interviewing an expert. These conversations.
We're not experts.
No, you're not an expert. Let the introduction happen, man. Come on. Okay. These conversations are with my boys that I usually have off camera that we'll have on camera. I feel like that some people could benefit from it and maybe take something from it. So without further ado, I'll let my boys introduce themselves.
I'm Kiro Zachary.
I'm John Bisho Aziz. My friends call me Bisho.
So this conversation I think is going to be really interesting. I feel like we have a lot of these conversations, at a boys' night or, during a retreat late at night or after Sunday fellowship. This is going to be about what it means to be a man of God in Christianity, how it, relates to our faith. I guess I'll start off the conversation by talking about something I thought about on my way here is that we're literally doing this. People won't know this till now, but we're literally doing this in our church. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I feel like people outside, we're Coptic Orthodox. I feel like I've stated that before, but if you didn't know, it's one of the most ancient Christian denominations. It's a part of the Oriental Orthodox denomination. And we take great pride in our faith as Copts, Egyptians. But, a lot of people outside of my church and the people that I know in my life, they have a hard time understanding. It's normal to us, but it's not normal for everyone else. How much we're involved in our church. And, when I was a kid, I would want to go to the Friday night football games at my high school or go hang out with my friends. And my dad would be like, no, they're youth activities. You're going to go to church. And on Sundays, I want to sleep in. But there's no negotiation. I'm getting up for church and I'm going to Sunday school after. And through those experiences, we learn so much about our faith and about the biblical narrative and all the important stories that we know. And I've seen that throughout my life. Like I went to Catholic school all my life, and I remember my sophomore year, we took an entire class on the Paschal Mystery, which is about the crucifixion of Christ and the mystery of it. And you'd be surprised how many people that are Christian don't know these stories. Like that stuff we learned in like second grade Sunday school. And that class was, it was easy for me because I understood the concepts and I knew the story and how important it was to our Christian faith. But so many Christians outside of our church don't. And again, like now in college, a lot of my friends kind of view me as this religious person when I'm not at all. Like I'm a terrible Christian. Like I'm a very lukewarm Christian. And like the funny story is I had a friend who was telling their mom that I was Coptic and how much I knew about my faith. And her mom was like, oh my God, like he's so, like you have to get your brother to hang out with him more and like, try to talk to him about these things. And that's someone you should be around more. Like he's a saint, like you should be around him more. And, like that makes me feel like a deep guilt because I'm not very religious. I'm a really bad Christian. I'm not a good representation of Christ at all. And a lot of people around me, like yesterday, I just had a friend tell me like they admire how religious I am. And I hate that because I'm not. I think, I try to tell people there's a difference between being religious and knowing so much about your faith. And I align on the path of knowing so much about my faith and not being religious. And I have like a deep sense of guilt about it because I feel like God has blessed me with like the opportunity and the knowledge to know so much about him, and that comes with a great responsibility that I don't take advantage of, and I feel like God expects more from me and is going to judge me more on that end.
I feel like that's one of the things that's interesting growing up in a Christian surrounding, like especially if you're affiliated or you have some sort of service at church, you're a deacon and whatnot. I feel like every Christian kind of will experience that sense of guilt, because it's very easy to have an image of somebody that you are not. It's very hard to be an image of somebody who you actually are. And I think in Christianity, it's kind of difficult to be close to a source of light, to kind of reveal how broken you are, how many scars you've taken from this world through your sin and whatnot. And so I think that's just kind of a part of the Christian walk, which is making sure that, there's famous quotes from our saints where it says like, you should not let a compliment affect you, like when somebody says something good about you, but at the same time, you should also not let an insult affect you as well. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of this stability, knowing that, you're 10 toes down, you know where you come from, you know who you are, you know your weaknesses. And so if let's say, for example, KZ comes up to me and gives me a compliment, I don't want that compliment to uplift my pride. But at the same time, when he insults me, I don't want that insult to hurt my pride. Mm. And so the more you're grounded and rooted to who you are, and allowing God to reveal who you are, which is his creation, the more true you will be to yourself. So things don't affect you in that way, I feel like that's just part of the Christian walk. Awesome.
You said to, like, allowing God to reveal who you are. I think that's a really scary thing. Like for me, I think sometimes I fall into, your shoes most of the time, where I feel like I know a lot about the faith, but I kind of just try to keep it there. Yeah. I feel like I get scared to get a little closer to the faith in God, just because it reveals a lot of like what's in my heart. So it can be a little scary for me. I found that that's the biggest issue with my progression in the spiritual life, is having to face myself in the mirror, because I feel like the closer I get to that light, the dirtier I see myself. So it's often fear of seeing who I really am.
Would you say, like, do you think it's easier? Do you think it's easier to live to live concealing yourself from yourself? Does that make sense? Like, I feel like sometimes the reason why I don't want to go to the light is because I'd rather not come to grips at what's going on in the dark, if that makes sense.
Can you explain a little more?
So, like, for example, let's say I'm struggling with something. Let's say it's a vice or habit or whatnot. Or let's say it's a thought or a thought pattern that I have. I feel like one of the struggles about walking that narrow pathway is that sometimes our own minds deceive us into thinking it's so much easier to just not go to the light so I can just kind of hide this part about myself rather than go to the lights and kind of reveal what's going on. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's one of the biggest struggles is coming to grips with the fact that, almost confessing on who you are and what you're doing it's like when you're in the moment of coming to grips with that and thinking like, okay, this is the time to reveal it. Sometimes our mind convinces us that it's easier to just continue with who we are, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's like self-accountability in a way.
Yeah.
Would you describe it as that in
Yeah.
a way? But yeah, I just, I think that for me at least, I think like a big fear of mine is that because we're so blessed to be born in the Coptic Church and to know so much about our faith, is that we're held to a higher standard by God. So when you falter from that higher standard, I feel like, God is going to judge me in a way that he might not judge someone that wasn't given the opportunity that I was. And I don't know necessarily that's the right mindset to have as a Christian. And it's something that I struggle with deeply because that's what I think. And, it's hard to take that self-accountability. That's something, sometimes as a Christian, like I do stuff that is not very Christian-like. And, it's difficult to come to grips with that and to also be seen by a lot of people as something that I'm not. And that mantle of responsibility I think it's very difficult for me to grasp. And I don't know if you guys have had that. I know you said you had probably similar experiences to it, but I just like something that when I was driving here, that was like one of the first thoughts that I had. So I thought it would be a good way to start the conversation, but I don't know where to go from here necessarily. You know what I mean?
I mean, have you struggled with that as far as kind of carrying this guilt of knowing what you should be doing and yet not doing it, and then people perceiving that you wouldn't do that, if that makes sense? Not to put you on the spot, right?
I mean, yeah, I definitely sometimes carry that guilt, but I think like it's okay to be vulnerable, and like if my shortcomings are exposed, which like they have been, they get exposed all the time. Like I'm okay with that. Like I think we have to be vulnerable with one another in terms of our shortcomings. Like yeah, I definitely have that guilt, but then I think to myself like everyone's going through something. You know? So my question to you guys is like, how important do you think vulnerability is in Christianity? Because I feel like we live in a society where, especially this politically divided society, where being a man is holding to yourself, keeping your thoughts to yourself. I feel like vulnerability is looked at as weakness. So I personally find it to be pretty important in the Christian walk, just because exposing your weakness is almost freedom to me. So what do you guys think? What's the role of vulnerability as a man in Christianity?
I mean, the Bible says, confess your sins to one another. It's kind of like an act of love. And so I think I would argue that it takes more courage for a man to be vulnerable than it is for a man to be secluded in like his own cave. Because when you're secluded in your own cave, nothing can really hurt you. If that makes sense. If you're vulnerable, like if I reveal something about myself to you, and you tell me that, or I for the first time hear what it is that I've been hiding and that I'm ashamed of, for example, then that takes a lot of courage to begin with, and I don't think that is per se something that is should be perceived as like a weakness. But at the same time, I've also seen men go to the extreme of that, where they use the fact that they're weak as an excuse to continue down the road of self-pity. Does it make sense? So there's like in everything in Christianity, there's a very narrow path where you can't go too far to the right, you can't go too far to the left. You can't be hiding in a cave, and you can't use coming out of the cave as an excuse to try to get other people to pity you in a way. So I think there's a really healthy balance, and I think that balance is like when you come out of that cave, it's not about I want your pity and I want you to feel sad for me. It should be like I'm coming out of this cave because I want to take a step forward. I want to be better, you know? And yeah, so I feel like there's a very strikingly there's a strike between each side of that extreme until you get that balance.
Yeah, I think there's a difference or a discrepancy between what it means to be vulnerable in front of God and what it means to be vulnerable in maybe a general sense.
Right.
When you're a man, I believe that at least what my perspective is that you should try, not let your emotions get the best of you. Whether that be with people who, like, one day you're going to be leading a family, it's okay to be vulnerable, but I don't think it's okay to be emotional in front of others unless they're super close confidants. Like, I feel like, we do a good job of this, the youth, the guys in our church, we're able to get vulnerable with one another and like share how we're feeling and describe, the deficiencies of our faith with one another and such, and maybe other problems that we're having in our life, but we're not getting emotional with one another. It's not like a crying fest. It's just like a conversation between men who care deeply about one another. Whereas I feel like with what some men, what at least society's telling people, is that it's okay to become emotional and to go into this route of self-pity. And, I think it's a masculine trait to be able to hold those emotions to yourself. And vulnerability with God, I think it's very interesting because I feel like, Jesus showed us what vulnerability in front of God is when he went to the garden and he left his disciples and went to pray before his crucifixion that was coming. And he was very emotional in that moment. But it wasn't that he was emotional in front of his disciples, in front of the people that he was leading. He went to himself. He went solo to pray and to meditate on this, not in front of everyone else. I think that's an aspect of what it means to be a man, is that Jesus was leading these men, and he didn't want to scare them. He didn't want to show this vulnerability to the men that he was leading, but he took a moment to his time to be vulnerable in front of his Father, in front of God, And, I think that's something that we can all learn from, is that it's okay to be vulnerable in your own moments and lean on God. And I think what we have in society is that because we live in such a secular society now, where people aren't necessarily think to go rely on God, is that they have no avenue for that vulnerability, which leads them down the path to being very emotional in front of other people and relying on other people, when, the best person you could possibly rely on is God. So I think that's the debate I have in my head about it.
What do you think that balance is between being vulnerable again around other men versus being vulnerable with your creator?
I mean, the vulnerability definitely changes, that's for sure. Like if I'm praying, sometimes I'll get pretty emotional. Tears will start rushing out. But I mean, by vulnerability, I meant like just exposing weakness, not trying to act like, oh, I struggle with, someone says I struggle with lust. Oh, no, I don't struggle with that. Like, I think it's okay to connect with others and have them feel, seen in that, you're not the only person going through this. I particularly think of
That retreat?
the retreat.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
For the people watching, not going into too much detail, there was a retreat where, I don't know, there was just some
It was a special moment, yeah.
There was just some spiritual movement in everyone's hearts. So all the guys went into a room and they started talking about weaknesses. Like, guys, you might never imagine talking about weaknesses. Or us guys, we like to show each other that we're strong and
or we don't care about
we
this
don't
certain
care.
sin. It doesn't affect us, but
yeah, once everyone started opening up and saying, hey, this thing is attacking our generation, people's guards started to go down. And I remember that retreat in particular, like, I felt some sort of freedom I've never felt before. Like, I was on a journey towards a path after that retreat. Like, hearing people say, oh, I haven't felt, freedom in X amount of years. I'm like, whoa, like, you're going through this too? So it built like a brothership and a bond, and then freedom after that.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant by vulnerability, is kind of connecting on that level. You know what I mean?
I think that is one of the most, if not the most important part about being a man, is this, like, the brotherhood that you build with people. And so in that way, I absolutely agree that you should be vulnerable with a group of men that you entrust, and that to build that brotherhood and that sense of community. And I feel like so many people in our society today are lacking that sense of community, and then that leads them down avenues to find that sense of community.
yeah,
And
that's
to, like,
huge. Yeah.
and then they get into some really, what from a Christian perspective would be considered sinful and, not the best avenue to find it. And that's going to lead, to a whole bunch of different consequences that could come with it. So I absolutely agree that I think, I find like those type of vulnerable conversations, like, the most freeing, the most enjoyable, the most connected that I feel with anyone in my life, is when we're able. And that's what I love about, our community and the guys here at the church, is that I can have those conversations with one another. And, there's something about it. I don't know what the word is to describe it, but there's something beautiful about it. And, and it keeps me straight on my path. If I'm falling in the other direction, when I have these conversations with my friends, it builds your faith in a way that I don't think you could do solo. So I 100% agree with that, in that sense of what vulnerability means.
I had I had asked someone that I haven't seen at church in a long time to come, like, join us to hang out after one of the Sunday liturgies. And I asked him, like, oh, where have you been, bro? He's like, dude, I don't know. I don't really, like, get along with people here. I'm like, what do you mean? You're so sociable. What are you talking about? So I don't know, dude. Like, I do stuff outside of church. I can't imagine that this person does that. Like, no way. And they named a specific person. Obviously, I won't say who, but so I can't imagine this person doing that. Like, you guys are just good people. I'm like, bro.
Little do you know. Imagine.
Yesterday like, listen, I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I think people often think like Christianity is for people that are clean.
Yeah.
But like, I think really the people that attend church or are in tune with their spirituality are the people that are probably the weakest. They're so self-aware that they need God the most.
That's such a great point. And I'm just imagining that. Imagine if one of our parents were to sit down with us during like a boys' night and hear the way that we talk. I don't think they would think we're, the best, most pure people. But no, and I think that's such a like, what you just said is such an interesting point, because I find myself struggling with that too, is that like the people who show up the most are the ones who are the most self-aware of their own weaknesses. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're perfect. When you see someone that like goes to church all the time and is very active in liturgy and the youth activities and such, like it presents this image that they're, this great person and they got it all figured out. But that's not necessarily the case. Those are usually the people who are most self-aware of their weaknesses and are striving and have that self-accountability and are striving to be better versions of themselves. So in a way, like, maybe it's like arrogant for me to even think that I'm too sinful to go and participate in these things like that. In that way, it's not, it's not low self-esteem. It's the opposite. It's an arrogance. I don't know if you would agree with that or not.
I was just thinking, like, we were raised and kind of reminded, like, when we come to church, we always hear about different people complaining about certain groups, certain culture types at church and whatnot. And then so, it takes kind of a retraining of your mind to understand, what a church community is. It's not a house, like they always say, it's not a house for the saints, it's a hospital for the sinners. And so, growing up, just kind of seeing how, my generation, we were the children of our parents who just came from Egypt. And so, from my sister's generation, who's 4 years older than me, to mine, to Casey, and then to Toby's, we just start seeing that from the people who just came to America, we just started seeing this exodus out of the church and into the secular mainstream society.
Kind of assimilating.
Yeah, assimilating with society. And then there was a few guys who didn't want to assimilate and wanted a community, wanted that sense of brotherhood, and so we saw kind of this kind of, they say like trickle down economics. We saw that trickling down between generations, where, your generation, like, you look up and you see like, okay, well, Casey's still at church, he's still struggling with this, he's still struggling with that, I can relate to him on this. And then you look at me, you look at certain other guys that we have at our church that, we didn't have when we were first here. And we just see the result of that. We see the result of people just feeling that they wanted to chase that sense of community outside of their faith. And I think that was kind of a huge issue, where their sense of community was coming from places that weren't really gonna lead them in a path to, if they became self-aware at what they were doing, they had no source of healing for them. They had no source of cure for whatever type of diseases they picked up on the way spiritually.
I have a question for you guys.
Yes, sir.
So, I was thinking, this just came to mind. What is a moment in life where you guys were really like wrestling spiritually? Because something smacked me in the face. I remember particular moments in my life where I'm like, whoa, like I can either go this way, like, or I can go this way. So I'm curious, like, what's the story that brought you guys to be like, I think my life needs to be committed to Jesus?
I feel like that I'm still trying to come around to that. I feel like if I was really committed to Jesus, like how I want to be, then I would not be doing some of the things that I'm doing now. But I guess how I'll rephrase the question is what brought me to want to have more faith, to understand Christianity more, to love Jesus. Because I think for all my faults, I genuinely love Jesus Christ, like, and that's my Lord and Savior. So I think something that happened for me is when I was younger, I had a lot of, I don't know what's the word for it, but, you know, I've wanted to feel appreciated, and I wanted to, not attention, I can't remember, there's a word, it's on the tip of my tongue, it's not coming out, but validation. I wanted a sense of validation from the people around me, and when I was younger, so I always tried to fit in with the cool kids, you know what I mean? And, you know, at school, like, that's all that mattered to me. Like, when I was a kid, you know, this is kind of embarrassing, but, you know, I used to hate my curly hair because all the kids around me had straight hair, you know? Like, I think that's so stupid to look at now because I love my curls now. But when I was younger, that's it. So I used to gel my hair and try to comb it out. And, like, I just wanted to fit in, and I used to try to, like, you know, wear the certain clothes that all the kids in my school are wearing and just want to fit in. And my dad would be like, you should be proud to be Coptic. You should want to go to church. Like, this is the most important thing in your life. And I would just be like, oh, I don't like the kids at church. Like, I don't want to be around it. Like, I don't want to spend my Fridays at church. Like, this is not what I wanted to do. And I think, ironically, like, we have a basketball gym here at our church. And I think I've shared this with the boys before, but, like, if it wasn't for that gym, I don't know if I would, like, necessarily be here. And I'm not saying that the gym was the one that changed me to realize I needed to become Christian, but it was like an avenue for me to come to church. And then I started coming to church at basketball. And then I started to feel that, you know, validation from, you know, a memory that holds really close to my heart. I don't know necessarily if I've shared that before, is that, like, on Friday nights when we used to play, the high schoolers used to play basketball on Friday nights, and, like, the middle schoolers would play before. I was in 8th grade. And you guys used to let me play up with you guys sometimes. And there was one time where Tonhella walked downstairs and told me, like, I couldn't play because I wasn't in high school yet. And I think it was you or Fish who, like, grabbed me and said, like, no, we want him to play. And, like, that is something that, like it still holds a lot of, like, importance. And it was, like, such a significant moment for me because I felt like I'd end up not playing because she told me no, but that moment where, like, the older guys in the group kind of, like, defended and wanted me to play with them, like, it meant a lot. And that led me to, like, hey, why don't you come to Despeja on or Midnight Prayers, is that the English version of it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, we have so at our church, like, not to get too complex, but before liturgies on Saturdays, there are prayers in preparation for the liturgy that happen. And, like, that's when I really started. There's something about prayer and, like, the hymns that we have in our church. And I felt like, I don't know if it was the Holy Spirit, but I felt like it was almost the Holy Spirit that made me feel so connected to it. And I think that's what it was, is that for me, it was like the hymns and the prayers that came with it is when I felt my most deepest connection and a realization that, you know, this is what gives me peace. This is, like, purpose, like the purpose of life. So I don't know if you guys have had a different experience or if I went way off topic, but I would say that.
Do you want to go? I would say my experience is a little different. You know, in high school, I was really struggling with my faith, because, like, I was born right next to church, so my grandpa would walk me to every single liturgy and prayer that we had. And there was a time, you know, when I was in high school where I really needed peace, and I didn't have it. And so it made me question everything. And I remember going down this path where I was struggling with what the world now calls depression and anxiety, which I would categorize it from my experience of of Christ, I would categorize depression and anxiety as a restlessness for somebody who is becoming more and more aware of their sin and a need for forgiveness. And so I remember I was at that time, I didn't recognize what that was, what this depression or anxiety was. And I was looking for God, I was searching for him. And I remember watching, the Four Horsemen for atheists at the time, which was Sam and
What's that?
the Four Horsemen of Atheists. They were basically, they were atheists that were kind of championing this 21st century thought that that God is something that is ruining the fabric of society, and we're going around and we're trying to convince and debate Christians and Muslims alike, trying to convince them that what they're thinking and their God is basically evil in a way. And one of them recently passed away. I forget their names. This was years ago, but they were very instrumental in me questioning my own faith, and something that I realized was that the faith was not going to come through answers to my questions. It came through a healing from it came through a healing of the mind and the spirit, of which no man could give you, of which no situation could give you. So you can be in the midst of this state of depression and anxiety. You can be in the midst of failing at certain things in life, of being a man, being successful, going through college, knowing what you want to do, having a plan in life. And in spite of all of those different struggles with family and insecurities and not feeling validated and all these different things, and yet somehow, some way, you found a home, you found peace within you. And that's something, as Christ says, that's a joy that no one can take away from you, because if everything has been taken away from you and you feel that there's no going, nothing good can come out of this, and yet you have this peace that's within you, that's a testament to how real that peace is, because it's not a result of what's going on in your life, but it's a result of what's going on within you. And that's been kind of like my experience, my testament, where I'm like, I want to dedicate my life to Christ, was when he said, you're going through all this, you're going through all these, the waves crashing around you, you feel like you're going to drown, and yet he reaches his hand in and pulls me out. And I wake up the next morning and I'm still going through all of the mess of life, but I'm at peace. So I can fight. I can continue fighting. I could become more of a man, because what is supposed to be tearing me down is not. And I feel like that is a source of masculinity, which is looking straight at adversity with a mind at peace, a mind at ease, a mind that has faith that nothing is going to tear you down. You have a Father in heaven that has validated you, that has given you something that nothing in this world can.
So you're saying through your testimony, like finding Christ didn't mean not going through those waves, because Toby was saying that he thinks that he's still on this battle of, well, if I was really dedicated to Jesus, then I maybe would be doing things this way or that way. But I actually disagree. I think like Bishal's story is kind of similar to mine, where like he's really trying to stay on this narrow path, but he says like it's given him reason to fight. Like all those waves are still crashing down, and those things he's still going through now were the same things he was going through like in the past, before this whole like revelation. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's a big thing. I think for me, It was definitely college. College was a really big, like,
College is pivotal for a lot of men.
college was pivotal. For me, yeah, college was different for me just because it was my first time living away from home, and I had like this like abundance of freedom. So I felt like I can do whatever I want. So I would do things and dumb things and be validated, like, oh my gosh, you're so funny when you're, forgive me, I'll be honest, not sober. You're so, and I'm like, yeah, like, you know what? I gotta do this more. But then, like, I don't know, like, innately, like, something was in me where I'm like, dude, this is all like empty.
You're not happy.
I wasn't happy. But it wasn't like
Just empty calories.
Yeah.
empty calories. Thank you. But I don't know. Yeah, college was very pivotal for me. I remember being told in college, "Yo, Kiro, like, bro, you have like no friends in college. Bro. All your friends are from like the only friends you have are from the basketball court." And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm glad that person said that. Like, I think for me, yeah, college was very pivotal. I remember one time after, a night out with the boys, for example, I remember going back to my apartment and just staring at the wall, like, yo, like, what have I become? Like, who am I right now? And I remember I just had to really sit with myself, and I just felt like this insane amount of guilt. Like, I'd be doing things on Saturday and then putting my 20 on real quick to go to Sunday liturgy, so my mom like thinks I'm a good kid. But for me, that was really what changed my life, was like that insane amount of guilt I would feel like my first year, half a second year of college. It was really heavy,
Yeah.
but it changed me. Like, it really did. And those things that I struggled with in college, like, I still struggle with them every day.
Yeah.
And something that's really interesting about when you say that sense of guilt, because I don't think that sense of guilt I don't think any human is immune unless there is some sort of the fabric of their existence is a bit warped, whether it's for biological reasons or psychological reasons. But I really don't think any human is immune to that sense of guilt in this world. And I think we're living in a society which is trying to manufacture their own immunity to that guilt. They're trying to manufacture their own healing and for that guilt. And I think society recently is starting to wake up to the fact that there is no immunity from that guilt outside of a healing of the guilt from within. So whoever owns the source of that healing is the one you should gravitate to. And so I think the source of that healing is God. Like, I feel like there's so many things in our society which is trying to say, oh, you were born thinking that you're actually this way. Okay, well, we're gonna make the whole fabric of society agree with that, so that way you're immune from dealing with your own guilt.
Yes.
And I think that is the trap of the past decade of America's history right now, which is the manufacturing of something that inevitably will not work, will inevitably lead to a society that has, if I'm not mistaken, you can fact check me on this, I think is the rate of suicide is going up because they're lying to people, saying that, hey, we can cover your guilt, we can heal it, take this antidepressant medication, take these gender blocking medications, take whatever we're offering you as society to cover up from the fact that there is a guilt within you that you need healing. And it doesn't work. It's never worked, and it never will work. If you are created by a creator, then the creator himself owns the source of how to fix you.
Mm-hmm.
We don't own that. We're not God.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And to go off your point about the increase in suicide rate, it's not a coincidence that there's a positive correlation between the increase in suicide rate and how atheist as a society that we're getting, how secular as a society we're getting.
Yeah.
Gen Z is the most atheist generation that we've had in the United States and possibly in the history of human beings.
Yeah.
And with all these, problems that you're talking about with this concept of gender fluidity, and I think that goes back into what I was saying about, not just that, but like different ways that people are trying to find community because they lack that purpose and that duty within themselves because they don't have God in their lives. They don't have a fear of God in their lives. And I think that's, something, to maybe lead us into this direction, that is escaping what it means to be a man and what masculinity is this sense of duty and this sense of purpose. I think sometimes what it means to be a man is to be selfless, and we're called by God to sacrifice for the people we love, to be, a shepherd in that way where we're leading a family and you're leading your loved ones in a direction towards God. And what that does is that gives you purpose and duty, which can alleviate a lot of those, the depression and the anxiety and, some of the things that you were talking about. And, I feel like we're losing that as men today. And that's something that really scares me
Yeah, I think defining what a godly man is, I think it's a subject that you have to deal with very carefully, because I think we're all still trying to work to find what is that definition.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not saying that we're struggling to find the definition. I want to rephrase the definition 100% in Christianity is Christ.
Mm-hmm.
But how would Christ live right now in our world?
Mm-hmm.
How does he want us to live in this world? How does he want us to act? Who does he want us to defend?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that, for me, I've been struggling with it for a while, because, there's so many different things you have to care about in this world.
Yeah.
And what Christ calls you to truly care about is not of this world.
Mm.
Yet, you're responsible for the things in this world. So it's almost, does that make sense? Like it's almost,
No, I get what you're saying.
It's almost as if like it's a very difficult balance to try to find, because a little too far to the right, you care too much about your career and your success. A little too far to the left, well then you're going to be lazy and you're not going to care, and then you're using Christianity as an excuse to be lazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always struggled with trying to find that balance. I don't know, what do you think?
No, I definitely agree. I think for me, the struggle is always there in terms of finding the balance of a lot of things. I think every day I lean one way, then I go the other way, then my spiritual life is good, then it's bad, or it can. So I think it just tells us the importance of like wise counsel, like speaking to each other even about the balance, or maybe even bringing it back to that like vulnerability, truthfully. Because for me, I can go through that and care a lot about school and all that, and then just pretend like I have it all together. Or I can open up to, like Bisho, for example. Say, Bisho, I'm struggling with this, and what do you think?
Yeah.
Or like Abuna, or someone that I trust. So yeah, I think it's a huge struggle. Like it's all about that balance, and yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out every day.
Yeah, going off that, I think, like, I'll share something with you guys. I think I find myself...
and the world, but that's...
Yeah, and the world. The 10 people who might watch this.
Watch it blow up, have like 3 million views.
You know what you should do? You should say, if you've made it this far, please comment
something
and then for that $50 gift card.
Oh, yeah, you saw that?
Yeah, I saw it.
By the way, there's a raffle that I'm doing on my Instagram for $50. So if you want free $50, go do that. Check it out. Toby Talks Podcast on Instagram for $50 free if you'd like it.
Are you gonna tell them that's fake or no?
No, it's real.
Oh, you actually have $50?
Yeah.
Guys, we're 48 minutes in. Listen, if you've made it this far, comment. What should they comment?
I made it this far.
I've made it this far, and Beach will buy you a $10 gift card to Starbucks.
I'm broke, bro.
Okay, fine.
But okay, but going back to it. Let's be serious for a second. Okay. But going back to that struggle of going too far right and too far left, I think that's something I struggle with. Is that something that I believe that the Bible teaches is that like the Bible looks down upon laziness and rewards hard work. I think throughout the Bible, like God rewards hard work of people, and sometimes I find myself taking that to an extreme, whereas like I want to be overly ambitious, you know what I mean? And that overly ambitious turns into lust for money and lust for worldly things and just lust in general. And that's something that I deeply struggle with in my personal faith, is what's the difference between being overly ambitious and trying to put in the work to get to that top echelon of life, and because I feel like that's what God designed a man to do, is to just go and work hard and to get to that point, but also not lose yourself in those worldly things. And a story that I personally struggle with in the Gospels is the man who goes up to the rich young man who goes up to Jesus and says, "I follow all your commands. I follow the 10 commandments. What must I do to enter the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus tells him, "Sell all your things and follow me." And that verse deeply scares me, because I don't want to, like, it's funny. There's one, it's so stupid, but there's one lyric from a rap song that, like, when I heard it when I was a kid, has always stuck with me. It's a song called Blessings by Big Sean and Drake. And one of the verses in the song is, "I cannot see heaven getting much better than this." And, maybe that's my own experience, because I've lived a very, very, very blessed life. And, I'm not, naive about that. And, when life is really good, like, I always think to myself, how can heaven be much better than, the dreams that I have here in the world, where I have all the cars I want, and I have this, and I'm super successful, and I have this status, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, those are things that I feel like, will make me happy, and I don't know if my faith is enough to combat that. And I feel like I'm going in circles here, but that's just like the struggle that I have personally with it.
Yeah, I would say, in being from the Coptic community, you get access to the Desert Fathers, which are monks that go into the desert and they spend their life in prayer.
Yeah.
And so it's ironic that a similar verse, which is "Sell all your belongings, come and follow me," similar verse is what inspired the first monk, which was Saint Anthony, to go and to pray in the wilderness. And he heard that verse in a church, and it was something that he also struggled with, that was on his mind for years until he made the decision to go. And so in those writings, you'll find that monks, people who decided to sell all and to go and to pray and follow Christ, is that they've sold all their possessions, and yet the source of their love for those possessions was still in their heart. So they write stories about how monks would become obsessed with a pen that they had, something so trivial. A monk could have sold hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of materials or houses or cars in order to go to the desert, and yet their love for this one pen was equivalent to the love that they had for all those things. And so I think rooting out that love for your possessions is much more beneficial than trying to I think it's much more difficult to root out that love, and I don't think giving everything up is going to root that out. I think what Christ was trying to show in that parable was that the love that rich man had for all his possessions was more precious to him than the love that he had for Christ. And so you can take somebody in America, if Christ comes to them and says, sell everything, come and follow me, they could have everything and still sell it and follow him. It's having nothing is not a direct indication of that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so it's a rooting out of what's within your heart. That's the struggle. That's where they go to the desert to try to root that out, and they still find trouble doing it. Does that make sense?
I think going back to what you were saying about like how ambitious should I be, so a piece of advice someone gave me regarding something similar to that is like a quick thing to maybe think in your mind is this bringing some sort of glory to God, or is it bringing glory to me? And I've found that piece of advice to be the worst and best advice I've ever gotten, just because it's really like rooted out a lot of things in my life. So I think that's one thing maybe like you can think to yourself.
It's very eye-opening, honestly.
And then in terms of the parable, I think Christ said that to him because that's where his heart still like was. Like the love of the world and his possessions. So I think if something is like taking God's place in my mind or in my heart, that is like I'll be ambition or relationships or I don't know what else. Basketball. Truthfully, basketball did at one point. I knew it wasn't a healthy relationship I had.
And it doesn't have to be obvious. It could be something like trivial, like you said, basketball. There's people that are obsessed with so many different things in life, and that obsession is coming from a misplacement in their heart for something that is trivial versus something that is actually important. And so I think that could take form in so many different things. That could be an obsession with politics. That could be an obsession with girls. That could be an obsession with possessions. That could be an obsession with food. There's so many different OCD type of behaviors that they classify all the time. But I think the root of that, the root of that is something taking its place that should have been dedicated to its creator.
In terms of basketball, like truthfully, it's so trivial and stupid, but it did have like, it was on like the throne of my head at one point. Like, I gotta be good at basketball, and this is my identity, and this is how I get like people to talk to me and stuff.
Oh, you did get really good though.
He's all right. He's a little past his prime now, but he's still good.
The knees. I can put the microphone on my knees. But what did that mean? Like, that didn't mean I had to give up basketball. Like, that doesn't mean you have to give up ambitions. I think you just have to twist it a little bit.
Sure.
For me, it was, okay, I can't give up basketball. What can I do with it? Like, what brings the most glory to God? It was maybe inviting people to basketball I otherwise wouldn't. Like B-Show.
That's a fat joke, by the way. That's a fat joke.
No, but in all seriousness, like, it would be, okay, how can I encourage this person? Now, am I the best at it? No, I still yell at people at basketball here and there. But it was...
Yeah, I've been the recipient of some of those.
By the way, after Toby's man got, voted in, we played basketball. When was it? Wednesday?
It was Donald Trump, if you don't know who
Toby didn't miss a shot, by the way. It was
The energy was different.
Bro, Toby, dude, some random guy came to basketball. It was like a friend of one of the Egyptians. It was a white guy. He's like, yo, you gotta guard him. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I've never heard anyone
say that about Toby.
Did
Dude, I'm just an inconsistent shooter. But like there was something about the energy, something about the MAGA vibes were in the air, bro.
Dude, yeah,
The MAGA vibes were
I've
in
never
there.
seen anything like it.
Your patriotism. Shooting the ball
That was
forward.
Captain America out there, bro.
Dude, pulling up from the white line. Even
No way.
Dude, I was hitting, bro. But the thing is, the day before I was also hitting. So like it was just like
No, it's the excitement, the anticipation.
yeah,
of the,
but like now it can't like I think honestly I think the reason why I was missing shots is because we were like, you know, Biden was in charge. But now that Trump's in charge, like I don't think I'm ever gonna miss a shot again. But
Yeah,
No,
sure.
yeah,
Trump economics, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, continue. Sorry.
I forgot what I was. Oh yeah, I was just saying. Yeah, essentially, like what brings God the most glory. So, if we can spin our desires, like I don't think desires are bad in and of themselves, but how can we spin them to bring God glory? And it's cool. We're talking about all this, and I'm saying these things, but genuinely, like, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. It's not that I'm saying this from a place of like authority that I've conquered this, but it's a struggle every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes I find myself in a place where money is competing with God. And I think that's a scary place to be because I'm a big believer in that money doesn't make you happy, but money gives you freedom and freedom makes you happy. But what I'm really saying is the freedom to do what you want can alleviate some of the troubles that you have in society, but that God is what makes you happy. You know what I mean? And I think, you know, that's something I struggle with all the time. It's just like this desire that I have to make money and to make sure that I have the financial freedom to do whatever I want and to take care of the people that I love. And, you know, I think you really opened my eyes with that comment about like, does it bring glory to God? And, you know, that's something I got to think about now. So I was really impactful that I think stemming into that, you talked about maybe relationships could take that place, you know. But I think this is an important conversation because I think you know, as men and as Christian men, you know, I think relationships and finding a woman of God in your life is like, I'm sure that it's something that probably consumes our minds a lot. Women in general, I mean, for me personally, women in general consume probably about over 50% of my brain power.
Can't relate.
But if I'm being vulnerable, it's the
Yeah.
truth. And, you know, another thing that I've heard, George Janko, do you guys know who George Janko is? He talked about this one time, and I thought it was, he said it so well, where he said that he too had this problem, and that someone, maybe you've seen this clip, but he said he too had this problem, and he was talking to someone, his own spiritual like confidant, and this person said, if God looks at all of us as sons and daughters, and you're living the life that you're living, because he was essentially saying like, oh, I'll just do whatever I want now, and then God will give me someone, and then like I'll change for the right person. But then he said, imagine if you were someone's father, you wouldn't give your daughter to someone, you know, who's not on the right path. You were looking for someone on the right path. So what makes you think that God is going to give you one of his best daughters if you're not, you know, making the best version of yourself and being a more faithful man? And that's something I've thought about a lot ever since that comment came up. So yeah, I guess this is just my leeway into, I think, another aspect of what it means to be a man of God in Christianity is a relationship with a partner, and, you know, how can we be men of God in a relationship with a partner, and how can you, you know, get yourself to that place where you know that you can find someone.
Well, I want to go back to that example that you just said.
Sure.
I don't think God is up there saying like, oh, you're a great man, so I'm going to reward you with a girl. I don't think he's like a genie like that.
Sure.
But I think humans, you attract what you are. So, for example, you know, I always see these podcasts with, I don't even know what it's called. It's like a bunch of girls
Fresh
talking,
and Fit?
I don't know, something like that.
Is it like, I think I know.
It's a bunch of nonsense, though.
It's probably fresh and fit.
Yeah, I don't really care for what they're trying to say because, the girls that are talking on that podcast saying, like what they're expecting in a guy and what they want and stuff, it's just very interesting because, like KZ, for example, like KZ is not going to be attracted to that type of girl to begin with.
Yeah. I don't think most people
And
are.
so the type of girl that
if we were talking about fresh and fit, yeah.
yeah, it's just the type of
Respectfully.
girl that KZ is going to attract is a reflection of who he is internally.
Sure.
And so it's not that God's going to reward you. It's that the reward that you get is that you now see people in a reflection of who you are.
Sure.
So, out of the goodness of your heart, you'll be able to discern the goodness in other people's hearts. And so that'll make you better at choosing a better companion. And so, like, God willing, when we have sons and daughters, it's I won't have to train my son or my daughter how to choose people.
God
But
willing,
in
sons.
Yeah, but rather I would what?
Just sons.
Just sons? Okay, we're going down that road.
I have no part in this.
Yeah, we have no part in this. But God willing, who they are as people will naturally be reflected in who they choose as friends, as partners, as choices in careers. Everything is a reflection of what's going on within you. So yeah,
I think relationships can be a whole topic.
it's tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky. You have to be very diligent and
Tell
careful.
me about it.
But I think like our role in relationships is, I can seek after someone that has their life together spiritually, treats people a certain way, acts a certain way, but then I think to myself, like, am I even that person? So I think one of the most important things is, as we're setting standards, it's like we have to, try to meet them
Hold yourself to
ourselves.
that standard.
Yeah, for sure. But in terms of relationships, like sitting, at the throne of your heart or your mind, right, like before God, I think that's a very dangerous thing. Because I think I saw like this image. It was like a triangle, and God was at the top of the triangle, and then the two people on each
Husband and
corner.
wife, yeah.
And it's like the closer you individually get to Christ, the closer you actually get to each other. So I think instead of like putting that person, on that throne, if you individually put Christ on that throne, then you'll actually get closer together than you'd think.
But why is that?
You're oriented to like a certain goal or purpose. You
Or
think
is it
in a way?
because you're oriented towards? I feel like forgiveness plays a real big part of that.
Yeah,
It
I agree.
100% does.
I think like definitely the closer you get to Christ individually, like you see your own shortcomings and you're able to extend that grace to that person. It's like when you're like hyper focused on somebody, you are very, very what's the word, like very critical. You know what I mean? Like
Overly critical.
overly critical, because if all you're focused on is some person, you're focused on their actions, what they do, how they speak,
Or their inactions.
you're
Yeah,
gonna have
yeah,
an opinion on everything. But I
100%.
feel like if you're focused on God, it really changes your perspective. So if I was focused on God, I probably wouldn't see certain aspects or shortcomings of someone. Whereas if I'm hyper focused on somebody, like I'll have an opinion about just about anything. So I think it's a very dangerous thing to put someone
On the pedestal.
on that pedestal. Like it requires like a lot of wisdom and counsel and prayer,
Yeah.
for sure. My sister sent me something 'cause I'm trying to get advice from her about, you know, certain things in life, and she keeps telling me prayer this, prayer that. I'm like, okay, like, give me practical things. So she sent me this video by Anba Yusuf from the Southern Diocese talking about the same thing, saying like, I have a lot of people coming up to me seeking, you know, counsel, and I tell them prayer. Like, okay, say it now, like whatever, give us more practical things. And he's like, if you don't think prayer is a practical thing, then like you are mistaken. You're
Yeah.
wrong.
You haven't seen the power of it.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for sure prayer is a huge thing in relationships. But your individual, like spiritual life, for sure, it's got to be there.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I want to ask you guys a question, because you brought up prayer. How do you think there's a right way to pray, and how do you guys? Because I think that's in my faith. That's the number one thing I struggle with. Is I don't like sit down and pray. Like I have moments where I'll be in the car, or like, you know, to myself, where I'll say like I'll be speaking to God in my head, or something I like to do is say like in my head repeatedly, like if I'm just like not doing anything, like Christ have mercy on me a sinner, Christ have mercy on me a sinner, Christ, like repeat that in my own head. But like I struggle with the concept, or I just don't do it. Maybe it's just out of pure laziness or whatever, where I'm not actually sitting and praying and speaking to God in that way. Do you think that's the right way to pray? Or do you think, yeah, do you think it's the right way to pray? I don't really know how else to phrase the question.
Mm-hmm. So, right way to pray. I think you asked the question that Christ answered directly.
Mm.
And so, in the Sermon on the Mountain, Christ quite literally tells us how to pray.
Yeah.
And so he says, you go to your room, you shut your door, and you talk to your Father who's in a secret place, and you say to him, "Our Father who art in heaven," and then he continues on. And then he always says something that's very interesting. He says in the Sermon on the Mountain, the word secret is repeated multiple times. And your Father who sees in secret will then reward you openly. And so I've always noticed that you can pray while you're in the car, while you're doing this, that, whatever, going through the busyness of life. But there's a reason why Christ said in your room, because I think in your room, that is the most intimate and it's the most secret place, where nobody can know and nobody will know. Nobody can see you and nobody will see you. And he also put, shut the door, meaning that it's so intimate and it's so secret to the point where only in your room can that happen. You know, we talk about like marriage life. The most intimate place for a husband and a wife to be is in their room. And so I think there's a sense of intimacy, and there's a sense of going into your room and praying to your Father. I think although it's an outward showing of secrecy and faith that he will be there, it's also a reflection of you opening something that's secret within you, which is your heart.
Yeah.
Which is something that's very intimate to you.
Yeah.
You know.
That's well said.
I think I always hear people anytime this question is asked, like talking about the pray unceasingly verse, and I never understood what that meant. Like I thought it would have to be this whole introduction, like in the name of the Father, and this like at work, at school, anywhere. And I didn't know how to do that, so I started realizing I just like compartmentalize my prayer time and church time and then like the rest of my life. Whereas I think prayer is just inviting God into every aspect of it.
Yeah.
And it's like even with ambitions, like it can be as simple as taking a breath and like, hey God, I don't know what I'm doing today. Am I doing too much, too little? Like, that's it. It can just be simple conversations, or going into like work, for example. Hey God, I'm about to talk to my manager. Please be with me. Help me to speak wisely. Or for me, I'll bring it back to basketball. Like, I would get angry a lot at basketball. So I'd say, God, please, like, pierce my tongue and just go into basketball. Like, it's pretty interesting what praying unceasingly means, and then what it does to you. Like, it just grounds me and makes me remember, like, what I'm doing, who I'm doing it for. Because when I would compartmentalize,
It's like living two different lives.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'd live like the secular life, and then when I try to circle it back around to my spiritual life, I'd be like, whoa, like, I'm a stranger here. Like, I do this once a week, but it's like, no, it can be as simple as any, and people have their own ways. Like, some people fast, some people pray, some people read the Agbeya every morning, and it's different per person. But compartmentalization is just something I used to struggle with. I think I'm getting better at it, but I don't know. I think that's something that really helps.
That's incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree. What do you guys think is why'd you look at him like that?
Bisha probably has to use the restroom.
I'm just kidding. All right, last question. Let's do it.
Okay, last question. Oh, now I'm feel pressure. I don't know which way to go.
Make it a
now.
good one, man.
I don't know. All right.
What's your political views, bro?
Dude,
Let's
let's
not- let's not get into
Dude, you can check out the YouTube channel if you want to. I have videos on that. Anyway. Jeez. Okay, there were two that I wanted to ask, but I'll let you guys choose. We can go down like Christian masculine qualities, or we can go down talking about lust. Which one do you guys want to
I like the second one.
Lust?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I mean, for me personally, like, I struggle with lust, like, deeply. You know.
Still can't relate.
Yeah. Yeah.
That must suck.
Maybe
man.
you're just gay, man.
Okay.
So, I guess as men, like, we have this biological, like, thirst for, everything sexual. I think, that plays a different role than biologically than what it plays in a woman.
Y'all want to do the first one?
Yeah.
Actually, wait, hold on. Can I just say
Sure,
something?
you good.
So, every man will have to battle lust.
Sure.
The issue with the battle of lust is that lust in and of itself is a perversion of love.
Okay.
Okay, it's twisted. It's not how it's meant to form itself into your reality.
Mhm.
So when you actually get into the root of the battle with lust, you'll find at the bottom, right, at the barrel of what lust is your need and your desire for companionship, for closeness. And you'll find that when you battle with it, when you struggle with it, it's not something you battle and you just win.
Okay.
It's something that you battle and it's like going through fire over and over and over again, like metal and fire. It's refining.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that is making you into, forming you into something else that's stronger.
Okay.
And so I think, especially dealing with the oncoming of technology and how that's formed and kind of exasperated the problem of lust with men and put it in their faces.
Yeah.
Like every man, it's
Yeah.
in their face, their own struggle. It's not something
Yeah.
that they can hide.
No.
I think at the bottom of the barrel is a deep sense of need for companionship and for intimacy.
Yeah.
And so I think the earlier you fight against it to get to that point where you say, you know what, I used to desire a girl that looks like this, that did this. I used to desire girls that did this and did that. I think once you get to the point where you say, I just desire a girl, I just want a companion, I just want somebody to be close to me. I think that is the battle of lust. That's where men should think about it. It's not, yeah.
No, I think everything you just said was absolutely right.
Can you say that a little louder?
No, that's the best you're getting out of me.
Never heard Toby say that to anything I've ever said.
Yeah, bro. Now you have it on recording too.
Yeah.
I'm editing that part.
Unbelievable.
It's fine. Yeah, I mean, I think it does comes down to a sense of like companionship and intimacy. I think, you know, I think more than ever now men are feeling lonely. And I think that exasperates the issue a lot more.
It does. And it makes the man think he is much more lustful than he is, when in reality he is in much more need for companionship. You know?
I found the root of a lot of my lusts, different lusts, like it's always just some ego, like some sort of ego. And it's always some sort of escape from reality as well.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes in stressful situations, I don't perform the best in stressful situations, so it can be some sort of like escape. But then I sit with myself and I think to the root. Like, I think 99% of the time I sit and reflect, there's always a root to the issue, whether it's companionship or rejection or abandonment or stress. It's always something. Usually it's always something.
Yeah.
So I think I'm still learning how to combat that. But I think it's a step in the right direction to know that usually there is a root.
No, yeah. Yeah, I think those are all great points. And you brought up an interesting point about like from girls to I just want a girl who's my companion. And you know, in the Christian faith, you know, you're not supposed to give in to that lust, at least until you're married. I think, what do you guys think? Like, I feel like it's difficult, especially in like today's world where, you know, I feel like people are getting married a lot older than what we usually were. And I think that just makes this issue of lust, even if you're in a relationship with one girl and you guys decide that you are waiting till marriage, but you're getting married later, you know, do you think it's that big of a deal? Like, what would you guys think? Like that aspect of it, if you're in a relationship with a woman, how, I feel like in our church, like, and maybe in like Middle Eastern culture in general, it's like, it should be like every other sin, but it's not. Like, there's more of a guilt to it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense to it? Or it's more taboo for us than it would be maybe a Roman Catholic who's living in the United States.
Yeah. I think it's a very touchy subject to try to nail down. But I think if we look at it from the way I view dating is, and I'm saying this from mistakes that I've made in the past.
Sure.
And from mistakes I no longer want to make in the future and present. I think the one thing that a man should take responsibility for is that when he is in a relationship with a girl, you don't want to take away something that you can't give back.
Yeah.
You know? So a piece of her heart, that's something that you can't really give back to her.
Sure.
You know, going to make it a bit more taboo, virginity is not something that you can give back to a girl.
Yes.
So if you mess up and you're not going to commit your life to her, you know, if you guys were just talking, you're in the talking phase and you figured that out as a man, okay, then you can give you can give, you haven't taken that much away outside of her time, which is also something you can't give back to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a godly man, from mistakes that I've learned, I think if I had to go back, I think a godly man will not waste his time, will not waste her time, and will not take away anything from her that he cannot give back to.
I think that is really, really well said. Like I 100% agree with that.
He said that twice now.
Yeah. No, but that one was like that. I think that is so true. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that, Dan.
I think like with dating, you have a pretty big responsibility in
Yeah.
terms of like your own purity, but that other person's purity too.
Yeah.
So, I think a game that us guys often play in dating is like, how close can I get to the fire without getting burned?
Yeah.
Like, is it holding hands? Is it, etc. So
Yeah.
I think it's Jesus and his 12 disciples were. Technical difficulties.
Sorry about that.
That's what I was scared about before the podcast.
It's
But,
okay, the millions of viewers will forgive us.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty big responsibility.
Are you? No, go ahead. I was gonna make a joke, but we're in a serious topic.
Oh no. I mean that's
Yeah.
really all I had to add. Is it's a pretty big responsibility, so it's difficult. Cause like you desire that intimacy with that person, you desire the closeness, but outside of the boundaries of marriage, like I've seen it become very destructive. Very destructive.
It can be,
And I think people trying to convince themselves that it can't be destructive, I think is I think it's kind of fooling themselves, and I think they're walking into a trap.
Mm.
And so I think it takes a lot of diligence and care and wisdom before you step into a relationship, because I think until you have a sense of self-awareness to know yourself, I feel like you can really easily hurt the other person.
Absolutely.
And I think those are things that you'll regret in a way. So I think it's a subject that takes a lot of care, and that can lead you down some roads of regret, even if you don't go all the way to the fire.
Right.
There's still some regrets that you can have.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I think it's your duty as a man in a relationship. You have the responsibility to again be selfless and to be aware of the other person and be aware of your own weaknesses, and you have that responsibility. That person's heart is in your hands, and you're not always going to be perfect at it. I know I'm not, but it's something that's really important to me. And I think as a man of God and a Christian, you should always have that sense of responsibility within yourself. So I'd have to agree with that.
That voucher, though. What was it, a voucher? A gift card?
So raffle, $50 raffle on Instagram,
That's
Toby
not
Talks Podcast. So
That's not even worth it. You better up it, bro.
dude, $50?
If someone made it to the end of this, that's impressive.
Actually, yeah, you should have somebody, like, if they made it to the end of this, they get a $70 voucher.
But how would they know that they made it to the end of it?
'Cause
They could
they
just skip
comment.
all the way to the end.
They wouldn't know. They're gonna search for it.
Some people watch the beginning and the end. Some people are
That's true.
like
That's
that.
true.
Anyway, but I think that's a good place to end. Do you guys have anything to add before we call it a day?
No, nothing.
No.
Hey, you who's listening, pray and have faith, and Christ will lead the way.
Amen. Thank you guys for watching.
All right.
All right, we're good. That was good.
That was pretty good.
I thought it was good.
That was almost 2 hours. Oh my
I
God.
saw